This episode offers psychosocial education designed to inspire and motivate our listeners. The information provided does not constitute a therapeutic relationship nor a substitute for professional mental health care. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, call 911, go to your nearest emergency room, or for listeners in the United States, text 988 for the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Warning, this episode contains brain food that will lead to improved emotional and social intelligence. Thanks for tuning in to Harvesting Happiness today for a healthy serving of consciously prepared brain food. This is Lisa Cypers Kamen, your host. Since 2010, we've been broadcasting sound ideas for better well-being. Each week, we spotlight diverse thinkers and doers who are contemporary trendsetters and change agents, devoting their lives to creating a better world. I invite you to listen and change how you think about human happiness. Our award-winning content is fresh, optimistic, and purpose-driven media that promotes well-being from the inside out. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for joining me on today's show, where we will be exploring why smart people still struggle with money, the emotional side of finance. My guest today is Tari Vickery. She is an author, Stanford-trained sociologist, and founder of Life Matters Financial Group, where she has spent more than 25 years managing the complete financial lives of individuals and families, drawing on roots in a 3-generation family of small business owners and her own dramatic personal financial shifts. She brings rare depth and empathy to the conversation about money and well-being. Her new book, The Emotional Side of Money, A Roadmap to Financial Wellness, is a guide to releasing financial anxiety and finally feeling at peace with your finances from the inside out. Welcome, Tari. And yes, from the inside out, right?
Right. Thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this.
Me too, because money is a very tricky subject, particularly when we talk about money and happiness and money and well-being. What research has told us about the relationship between the two, which there's significant research, but it's not everything, right? Money and happiness are not necessarily completely a correlate.
More than not completely, I would say. A lot of people think if only I had so much money, then whatever, I would be happy. I would feel secure. I would, whatever we think that will accomplish. And then they get that amount of money and lo and behold, they raised the bar.
Yeah. Well, and because as humans, I think that we are more wired than not like bowls with a hole, right? Like that we think we get that thing that we want, and ultimately there's a little bit of a crack or a fissure, and we're never completely full.
Exactly.
And so we're keep in that state of perpetual want.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your own story that brought you here, because I know a little bit about it and I find it relatable and inspiring.
Okay. Well, I come from 3 generations of scrappy, independent women who were the breadwinners in their homes. Even as far back as my great-grandmother, she raised her 2 children by herself. Her husband would apparently go out drinking and come home and get enough money to go out drinking again. And she died when my grandmother was 16. And so here she was at 16 years old with basically no parents. And the Baptist preacher in town took her to live with them. And as a result of that, she got to go to college.
Wow.
And she went to college at Oklahoma Baptist University because he was a Baptist preacher. And I'm guessing he got free tuition for her. But, that was in an era when women didn't go to college.
Yeah.
But she got to go to college and met her husband. And then he ended up leaving during the Depression to go earn money. He was with the Civilian Conservation Corps with the idea that he was going to send money home, but that never happened. And they ended up divorcing. And so she had to feed her 2 daughters with no help. And so she taught school during the day and she worked as a waitress at night. So the girls kind of raised themselves. I think they were maybe 7 and 9 when their dad went off to work. And, you know, they didn't have a lot of guidance at home because she was working and he was gone. So my mom ended up getting pregnant at 15. And by the time I was born, she was 19. And her husband was in the Korean conflict. And when he got back, they divorced.
Wow.
And she never got any child support. He left the state to avoid having to pay child support.
Oh, my
so
word.
Here she is, 19 years old, 2 kids, no education because she'd had to drop out because back then that was your only option. Right. And so here she is trying to raise these 2 little kiddos and support her family. So that's what I was born into.
Amazing. And yeah. I mean, you were also born into incredible resilience. I mean,
absolutely. Yes.
I mean, that's quite a story.
Yes. So money was the lens through which my mother looked at everything. Yeah. Can we afford it?
Yeah.
And the answer was always no. And so I grew up hearing about money because I think she felt like if she told us, if she explained it, it would help us understand why we couldn't have the things she really wanted to provide. And so, but she wanted us to understand it wasn't that she didn't want us to have those things, that she simply couldn't. And as a result of that, my first recollection of money was at about 4 years old, listening to a radio jingle and where it was an ad for a finance company to give loans. And the name of the company was DIAL, dial. And their jingle was dial, the numbers for the word dial for a loan. And I vividly remember saying, Mommy, since we always need money, why don't we just dial for a loan? Then she went into an extensive explanation of loans having to be paid back and interest, and she couldn't make ends meet as was. So to be able to pay back interest on top of the amount of money she'd borrowed, way more than a 4-year-old could understand.
Process, yeah.
But I do remember it to this day.
Yeah. Why is money so hard for us to talk about? We talk about the absence of it.
Yes. Well, sometimes people talk about the absence of it, but more often than not, I think many people have been told, in this family, we do not talk about money. We do not talk either. We don't talk about money, or they just model that we don't talk about money. And so kids grow up not hearing their parents talk about money. And yet they probably or possibly also grow up hearing their parents fight about money and have arguments. And it's about what somebody spent or not having enough to pay the bills or whatever the argument might be. But there's an undertone about money. And then there's this kind of code of silence that goes along with it. It feels like a taboo subject.
Oh,
and
yes.
So then we get to be adults and we haven't talked about it. We haven't learned how to talk about it. Our parents haven't talked with us. We have processed whatever we observed through the little brain at whatever age we were.
The lived experience.
And it doesn't get any opportunity to be tested or checked to see if what we heard is what was actually said or meant. And we just build these layers upon layers around money. And then we get into a partnership with another human being who probably has had a similar kind of an experience. And then you're supposed to decide, now we're going to talk about money and know how to do it.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen that way.
And there's such fuel behind money, right? Obviously, it's the currency that buys things. Right. But then the emotions, which your book is about, or the psychology of money and how it speaks to those lived stories of growing up with a single mom or parents that worked multiple jobs or in scarcity. And sometimes abundance. And when the abundance is then lost, and then the fear of constantly never having enough. I
Exactly.
mean, we could go on and on and on, but I would love for you to give us a window into how to start these conversations more compassionately.
Well, I think timing is a lot of it. You certainly don't have these conversations in the heat of the argument.
Yes. Or
I
before
can tell
bed.
you a quick wonderful story that was shared with me at one of my public speaking events. Young couple had just bought a new home and had a whole house to furnish. And they went to the furniture store to buy a sofa. And they ended up in a heated argument over which sofa to buy. And it left the furniture store without buying anything. Now, this couple was somewhat unique in that once they got home and got themselves calmed down, they actually talked about what had happened. A lot of couples would not do that, but they did. And what was fascinating is what they discovered when they talked about it. He had grown up in a home where his parents had the same furniture they had either inherited or bought as newlyweds. And so his thinking was, we need to buy the most expensive furniture, which likely will mean the best furniture that we can afford because it has to last a lifetime. She, on the other hand, was thinking, we have a whole house to furnish. We need to buy enough to get by to fill all the rooms, to at least have a place to sit down and eat or whatever we need to do. And so we need to buy several pieces of furniture, and it doesn't need to be the best one in the store. So they had totally opposite youth experiences, childhood experiences that they were each drawing on. But of course, they never talked about any of that prior to being in the furniture store. And it got played out in whether they were buying this particular style or that color or whatever, when that wasn't the issue at all. So to answer your question, I think their example of going home and talking about it is once they were calmed down. So certainly there can be a catalyst. There can be a situation just like they had. But on the other hand, I think certainly couples in committed relationships who are thinking about getting married or whatever the next step might be, they need to be talking about it while things are calm and questioning, how were things when you grew up?
Yeah.
And one of the things I will tell you at the end of each chapter of my book is a section called Something to Think About. And it provides questions for the reader or listener, if it's an audiobook, to focus on what they themselves think. Because before you can start talking to your partner or another person, you need to know what you think. And so many of us have never done that. We've never stopped to think about, why does this particular thing trigger me, or whatever this case might be. But so there's there are stories within the chapter, and then hopefully those will trigger thoughts. And then there's the something to think about. And then the chapter that has partners, there's something to think about for yourself. And then also a whole list of questions to kind of have a conversation with your partner.
So don't talk about money when you're in a heated discussion or arguing. Don't talk about money before bed, I would think. I mean,
Yes.
I know in my household, I do not want to talk about it before bed. And I think it's important. You said something really that sort of clicked in my mind about getting clear with where we are with money. What does money represent? Is it just security? Is it what we can do with it? The adventures that we can go on, what we can give away? Most of us don't even take the time to think about that.
That's right. And that is exactly why I wrote this book. I want to encourage people to figure out what you think about money and why.
Yes.
So there's a lot of my own story as an example, but there's also just a lot of suggestions of asking questions, even asking questions not only maybe of your own parents, but ask questions of aunts and uncles. You know, what was it really like in the household you grew up with? Because even if you do find out your parents' perspective, they may have had a very different experience than their siblings. Same thing with grandparents. If you've got grandparents alive, tap into those resources. And grandma, what was it like when you were growing up around money? she's probably never thought about it either.
Well, it's interesting because when you think about that, grandparents who are alive today, they were growing up at a time where the economy was quite booming here.
Yes.
So there was a lot of prosperity for a lot of people. And that has now shifted, and you have a whole generation of youth that are concerned they're never going to be able to buy a home.
That's right.
So I think that not only is the relationship around money important to sort of crystallize in one's mind, but also a more like global view of what we can do with money today, given the world that these young people are inheriting.
Exactly. And it's generational. And what, like I was talking about my own grandparents being in the Depression, a lot of people don't go back that far.
Right. Exactly.
But what was happening, as you point out, when the grandparents of today were in a boom era, and they could solve a lot of problems with money.
Yes.
That they didn't have to deal with the
logistical problems. Issues. Right.
Yes.
They could, not necessarily emotional, but logistical.
Exactly. It was almost like it was a Band-Aid, but because they had enough money, they could just basically buy a solution without having to deal with whatever the underlying issue might have been.
Excellent point. Really excellent point. And it was a time when people, if they had the resources, would gift their children or loan their children enough to put a down payment on a home, either forgive the loan or get paid back sometime in the future. And now that's not necessarily the case for most people. Yes, there's a segment of the population where that is true.
Right. But there's also the issue of how that was done. I had a client who did that very thing. She had significant wealth, and she set up promissory notes and interest, and her kids paid back their loans, and then they bought bigger houses, and they took the proceeds from the first house and rolled it into the next house. And if they needed more money to buy the next house, she did the same thing. But it was done with intention.
Yeah.
And by design, and there was never conflict. None of she had 5 boys. None of them ever missed a payment. And it was not a source of anxiety or conflict, where in so many families, when money is loaned, there's either an assumption that it's really not intended to be paid back.
Yeah.
Or maybe the person loaning the money does intend for it to be paid back, but then things come up, and it's typically parent to child,
yes,
adult child, and the adult child, things come up, they can't pay it back. Well, it's the bottom thing on their bills to pay, and when there's not enough, then there's that mom and dad don't get paid back.
They trim. They don't need it.
Yeah, and then resentment builds up, and it becomes conflict. Or it's just an underlying undercurrent within the family. And then you've got siblings where mom and dad might have helped this one. This one didn't need help.
Oh, the tally, the abacus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's take a break. And when we come back, we will continue the conversation with my guest today, Tari Vickery. We're talking about the emotional side of money, a roadmap to financial wellness. To learn more, head on over to Tari's website, tarivickeryauthor.com. And Tari is spelled in a unique way, Tari. You can find her on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and Instagram. Here comes the pause. We'll be right back. Harvesting Happiness is rooted in science. Our work facilitates applied positive psychology practices through media and consulting. We're committed to sound ideas for better well-being, leading to increased life satisfaction and a better world for everyone. We're not into pseudoscience or quick fixes. We're focused on common sense backed by rigorous research. Healthy critical thinking is the foundation for our discussions. We encourage you to challenge preconceptions and explore ideas with a curiously discerning mind. Collaboration with our guests is united by an inclusive vision to boost resilience, critical thinking, communication, and problem solving through civilized discourse and pleasurable relational engagement for everyone. Each day, we have the intellectual freedom to be happy or the liberty to be miserable, regardless of external circumstances. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, please seek support because good psychological health is vital to the achievement of a healthy and satisfying life. Visit harvestinghappiness.com for psychosocial and educational services that boost emotional and social intelligence. And we're back, continuing the conversation with my guest today, Tari K. Vickery. We are exploring why smart people still struggle with money, the emotional side of finance. Let's get back to it. So, Tari, I'm thinking a little bit more deeply about our money behaviors. And there are some of us out there who are very anxious around money, who are avoidant around money, who live in scarcity or overspend. And all of this is emotionally driven for us as humans, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
But let's talk about what's actually happening to us. For example, when we let the bills stack up and we don't open those envelopes.
Yes, I see a lot of this. I had a client in Oklahoma and I lived in California. And I would go to Oklahoma every 6 to 8 weeks I served on a school board there. So when I went for my school board meetings, I would meet with her and she would not open the mail from the time I left until I got back.
Wow.
And when I started working with her, she literally was having utilities turned off.
Oh, wow.
Because she so desperately hated opening mail that she simply would not look at it. So usually a utility bill is just a postcard. So she didn't even have anything to open. And yet she just avoided it. And the fact that her water bill got turned off or water got turned off or electricity was not enough catalyst to get her to do that. It was that painful. And so, of course, the first thing I did with her when we first met was got all those utilities set up on automatic payments.
Of course, yeah.
Because she had plenty of money. Sometimes the avoidance is, of course, because people don't have the money. And the idea is, I can't do anything about it anyway. I can't face it today. Maybe tomorrow I can at least put them in order. But, so there are stages of the level of and the depth of the avoidance, but it is a way that people try to deal with the stress. And of course, what we know is it really doesn't help them deal with it. It creates more stress.
Of course.
And that's why I have such a compassionate heart for these people, these folks, because they are just trying to stop the pain. And it is so deeply painful. I have had clients tell me talking about money gives them a stomach ache, gives them a headache.
And it's real.
There's a physiological reaction to the pain around money. And those are the folks for whom my book is written. It's the understanding that you're not alone. This happens to so many people. And sometimes just knowing you're not alone. I had one client say, when you told me I'm not alone, just that was the biggest relief I have ever felt around money, because I assumed I'm the only one who's like this. And that's just not the case.
Yeah. So helping people streamline, how they handle their expenses and their affairs is part of what we can fix, right? That's within our grasp to actually fix.
That's correct.
And no emotion tied to that. Once we surrender to the fact, there's this little thing called auto payment, we can solve that.
Exactly. But the thing is, in order for somebody to help somebody with that, they have to reveal the depth of their pain.
It's like being a hoarder.
That's something that's hard for a lot of people. But what I find fascinating, I started my business in about 2000, and I have never done 1 ounce of advertising. So the people I have been able to help have been willing to talk with their friends and family, so that I have managed to build an entire business based on word of mouth with a subject that people don't typically want to talk about. But I
Interesting.
think that's evidence of the relief and the consequence of the relief, that once they feel the relief, then they're open to sharing that with other people who they see struggling too.
I think we all struggle in one way or another. I don't think that any of us are immune, because what might be easy for you might be hard for me, or vice versa.
I think you're exactly right.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason for that is that we all have these triggers that basically come out of our childhood.
Yeah.
And I know even with my more wealthy clients, they still have those triggers. And when something happens that makes that trigger go off, then they go right back to whatever caused the trigger. And so that creates the anxiety.
So not only is it generational wealth that people have to manage if they are fortunate to have it there, but it's the inherited financial beliefs that all of us must deal with.
Absolutely. We all inherit money stories.
And what about scarcity? Because that comes up a lot in conversations that I have with clients, that scarcity mentality, that the pie is finite as opposed.
Absolutely.
This is very common, right?
I can tell you my own experience. It is exactly the pie issue, which I read about in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective Living. And I, of course, had grown up with scarcity on steroids. And but I'd never heard the term until I read Covey's book. And when I read that, it was such an epiphany that, oh my goodness, this gives a name to what I've experienced. And then of course he also talks about the abundance mentality, where if we run out of pie, we just make more pie. And
love that.
I cannot in my wildest imagination think I would ever get to the place that I could feel that way, because the scarcity was so deeply entrenched.
Yes.
But I read another book called The Drama of the Gifted Child that talks about how it has taken every experience of our entire life to be the person we are in this very moment. And that was another epiphany, because I could embrace all of the painful memories of growing up with my mom and my ancestry around money, and realize that those experiences have given me the resilience that was passed on to me, for one thing. But I could let go of feeling like I needed to, quote, fix myself.
Yeah.
And, I spent a lifetime in therapy because I had all of these things that I believed were, quote, wrong with me. And just the idea that I could embrace those experiences, and that I happen to love who I am, which helped.
Yes.
But that they all had a purpose, and they helped me be who I am today. And that was what helped me move from scarcity to abundance.
Very, very well described. And I think that both things can be true as well. Like, one can recognize that they are blocked or knotted up around their finances, and at the same time say, well, I don't want to perpetuate that legacy, so I'm going to organize my finances. I'm going to seek out financial planning. I'm going to take a hard look at the relationship with money, and as it relates also to power, right?
Oh my goodness, yes. And as it relates to, if you have children, as you say, the legacy you want to pass on. Because if we don't stop to investigate and reflect on our own, the ways we came to our thinking about money and how we do think about it, we are going to just naturally pass that on to our children.
Yeah. And we don't really want that, No, not at all.
I don't know anybody who is so secure in their money story that they would really want to pass on their own experience to their children.
Yeah, we don't want to cripple them with abundance, right? And we don't want to cripple them with scarcity.
Absolutely.
Right. And I think that both can be true.
Absolutely. Yes.
So the story you describe of the woman who did have the resources to help her 5 sons, she did so with parameters. She did so with agreement, with intention. And I think that is very healthy.
Yes, exactly.
Because it wasn't really about money. It was actually treating them as adults.
Well, and she was basically playing the role of the bank.
Yeah. And
She
and
had
it was
enough money
business.
to do that.
It was
but
business.
so therefore it was set up as if it had been done with the bank.
Yeah. I have heard this story before, and it does work out well.
Yes.
And, because everybody knows, what the playing field is.
Exactly.
But not everybody has those kinds of resources either. And so helping people who are listening to understand that they can write a new story about their relationship with money and create abundance and set out to create a financial base that is both strong and emotionally healthy.
Well, and maybe parents don't have the money to loan their children for a home, but maybe they do have money to loan them for other less expensive things. Yes. and even that needs to be done with thought and purpose and intention and a process for the repayment, and it be clear on the front end.
Yeah. I'm not just giving this to you, although one might choose to give their...
Absolutely. And I actually have told clients, I had a client once who was considering loaning a friend some money. And I said, do you think you'll be paid back? And she said, well, probably more likely than not, no. And I said, then I would recommend you seriously consider gifting her this money rather than setting up a plan that you do not believe she can honor. And then that's going to have a significant impact on your friendship.
Yeah.
And so and my client had plenty of money to be able to gift it if that's what she wanted to do. And so that's what she ended up doing, is not creating the dynamic that was going to negatively impact their friendship.
That's
because
a
she
good
really
story.
didn't think the woman would pay it back.
And maybe she couldn't. I mean, maybe her circumstances were such that maybe receiving that money allowed her to take a breath, but didn't allow her to get ahead,
Yes.
And this is the upside of the things we can do with money, right?
Yes.
For one another. I like that,
Yes.
Which is a perfect place to end, but not to end the story, which we hope our listeners will take a look or a read of The Emotional Side of Money, a roadmap to financial wellness, written by my guest today, Tari Vickery. To learn more, please go to Tari's website at tarikvickeryauthor.com. And as I mentioned earlier, Tari is spelled uniquely, Tari. You can find her on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Tari, what a pleasure. I really enjoyed this conversation.
I have too, Lisa. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for joining us on Harvesting Happiness today. This is Lisa Cypers Kamen on behalf of my guest, Tari K. Vickery, wishing you kind thoughts, kinder words, and the kindest of actions. Until next time, remember, happiness is an inside job. Happiness is your inside job. Please go out and rock your day and remember to be kind to one another. Want to explore more sound ideas for better well-being? Check out our new bonus edition content at More Mental Fitness by Harvesting Happiness on Substack and Medium. Subscribe, listen, and share hundreds of downloadable episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Connect with and follow us on most social media channels. To learn more about lifestyle management and mental fitness consulting services, please visit harvestinghappiness.com. Harvesting Happiness and More Mental Fitness are produced by Lisa Cypers Kamen, Andrea Mengele, Robin Boyd, Andrea Daly, and the excellent team at Podfly Productions, including Eric Begay, Kimberly Beck, and Alec Guess, in collaboration with TogiNet Radio, KBUU, RadioMalibu.net, and is available on PRX, the Public Radio Exchange.